Welcome to the Karma School of Business, a podcast about the private equity industry, business best practices, and real-time trends. I'm Sean Mooney, Blue Wave's founder and CEO. In this episode, Lloyd Metz from ICV Partners, Doug McCormick from HCI Equity Partners, and I delve into this really important topic. This particular conversation we had on one of our sister podcasts, Best But Never Final. It's the concept, it's the topic, it's the framework of AI. It's something that is going to matter tremendously to all of us in terms of reframing these technologies into as much success as possible in the days ahead. Enjoy.
All right. I get to be in Sean's spot today and welcome Sean and Lloyd. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Hey, Doug. Hey, Sean.
Great to be with you guys, Doug and Lloyd.
I'm really excited for the topic today. And this one kind of came about organically because I would say in the context of the last 18 months in my conversations with Sean, we talk about stuff that we intentionally talk about. And then it always kind of evolves into a discussion around technology, artificial intelligence, and what he's doing in his personal life and what he's doing in his business life around this topic. And I got to say, I don't want to give him too much credit, but I always find his insights here some combination of really insightful and really practical. And so the goal today is to talk about the topic of AI with really kind of 4 talk tracks. One is Sean as an entrepreneur. One is Lloyd and I as private equity investors. How can we think about this as a way to create competitive barriers? And how should we think about it in the context of risk to our business? I think we'd like to talk about policy a little bit. What are the long-term policy implications for some of this? And Sean's got some way out crazy futuristic ideas that I'm going to push him on. And then the last is, as a type A person who's always trying to figure out how to get more out of my personal life, what are some really cool AI hacks that guys like us should be talking about? So anyways, with that, that's the intro. Sean, anything you want to add?
No, I think this will be a fun topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart as not only just a person and someone who loves looking forward into where the world's going, but also as a business person. I think it's going to create tons of opportunity, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses that have not had the budgets to participate. So a lot of the stuff is really getting democratized for the full scope of business.
Well, I got to say, Doug, that is a lot to cover. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about Sean, who's at the mantle of his company here. He's a technology CEO and an entrepreneur and investing heavily in artificial intelligence, not only with leadership in adopting it, but also investing heavily financially in tools to make his business kind of more differentiated and grow. So just give us some perspective on why this has become such a key element of your strategy, what you see in your business opportunity, which excites you about AI.
And also, Sean, maybe start with when. When did this really blossom in your mind that we got to do this?
It really blossomed in the mind the day we started this business just over 8 years ago, and the technology wasn't good enough then. And so Blue Wave originally was going to be more of a self-serve marketplace. And what we realized was that the calibrations that we were doing to connect private equity firms, portfolio companies, public companies with all the resources they needed were just too complex for an algorithm to reconcile. There's too many variables. But we knew Alexa was eventually going to get smart enough. So we've been very purposefully structuring our data since day one. And then what I would say is in 2022 was the real aha moment. So I would always call the machine learning groups in our ecosystem, which were now called the AI groups. But I kept on asking them, is this stuff ready? Is this stuff ready? And every year, nope, nope, nope. And then 2022, they started saying yes. And that's when we hit the gas. And so we've been investing pretty heavily since 22. Really, the reason behind this, I always told my friends when I was doing this thing, it was kind of insane. They're like, you worked your whole life to become a partner at a PE firm. Now you're doing a startup. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do a startup, I'm going to do the private equity version of venture capital. And so viewing the world through the lens of the expected value calculation is just, and as a PE guy and a non-hedge fund guy, I can only do algebra and maybe arithmetic. I can't do the calculus. But it's like this whole idea of size of outcome times probability of success. And what we view AI is a huge enabler of a higher expected value. And so by using data, analytics, AI, and really purposely constraining the model. Like we've talked about before, there's value in that because it creates innovation. We've been able to grow this business pretty dramatically, really with a fraction, with very little capital outside. We only raised capital in the very beginning. And we've been able to do this in a way that we're proud of ourselves for doing it. But you think about AI, that brings it to a whole new level in terms of we're going to be able to make better decisions faster with less need for outside application of capital. Does that make sense? So I use it like outcome times probability and speed and certainty.
Hey, Sean, if you could just take a moment and at a very high level, simply describe Blue Wave's business model so maybe we can understand better how AI fits in and where it fits in.
We're best known as a market network, which is a play on a B2B marketplace, kind of very high-end version of that. And so what happens is we have many hundreds of private equity firms, thousands of their portfolio companies, public companies, and independent kind of proactive family businesses that call us and say, I need someone who's the best in the world at this specific thing, and I need them yesterday. And so we're viewed in this ecosystem and kind of created a category around being the experts of those with expertise in being able to quickly connect a business builder with the exact third-party resource they need, that it's like a private equity grade level of excellence, and doing this in rapid motion. So think of it almost like an Amazon meets like Gartner Magic Quadrant for the C-suite of business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like the way you describe that. Thank you.
Hey, Sean. So 2 questions for you. So you talk about 22 as being a foundational year when AI is finally ready. Was it just because the software models got better? Was it something around the quality of the technology in terms of speed and chips? And then I'll give you the second question. You can answer them both. So you talk about all this opportunity with AI, but part of me says, as you talk about your business model, man, that represents a lot of risk too. How do you think about like where you are relative to your competition and how to create real long-term differentiation?
Yeah. This has been a feeding into the way that we've thought about our business from day one, and that you have to be really excellent and you have to be really fast. And so for us, this has been the mantra from day one. Like, we got to be really good and really fast. You can't have one without the other. And some of it, this is kind of inspired by a lot of these titans of business like Toyota, Lean Six Sigma. How do you do things faster with little variability and then let them try to catch up? There's been a number of groups that have tried to copy paste us, and the vast majority of them have kind of gone out of business pretty quickly because what we do is really hard. And so for us, it was something that I thought was, this actually makes what we try to do as a business even better, because we'll be able to be even really better and even really faster in combination with each other. Really, the stuff that we started in 2022 is really the frontier model stuff, because we had already done the enablers that we can talk about that are going to be really important for anyone. But this is us, everything we're doing, we're trying to do certain things that are in service of the now. But a lot of the things that we think about starting every day or every year, it's really in service of what we're going to be from 3 to 5 years from now. And so you got to have a mix of kind of like long ball, short ball.
And when you talk about the frontier, you're literally talking about like investing in the software yourself that's proprietary to improve the quality of the outcome.
Building our own proprietary models. And that's exactly what we started in 22, is building something that no one in the world has and using these models. You had asked like what happened in 22. Well, what happened in 22 was a lot of the stuff really started in like 16, but you needed to have like Google budgets, then Facebook, now Meta budgets, where you had to have tens of millions of dollars. And then what happened was a lot of these models became commercialized and democratized, where they put them out into the world so that like mere mortals could start using them if you kind of knew that you could. And so that was the big moment for us. Like, oh, that was the question. It's like, can we afford this? Like, no, you're an SMB. You got to be Google to use this. But the 22 was the hallmark where this stuff first came out. And this was kind of right maybe 6 to 9 months in advance of like ChatGPT being released into the world.
You mentioned that what you do is hard. Just curious, in 2022, it sounds like you started with the hard part of what you do as opposed to the easy part of what you do. Is that fair? And if that's correct, then I would love to hear how you made that decision.
If you think about what we're doing with PE firms, they're calling us, they have this complex need. It has many dimensions. It goes across industries and special use cases and functional areas and budgets and timing. And there's 100 different products we get called on. And you need us to know exactly who you need before you need it. And then we've got to give you the exact options in a really calibrated, limited way within a business day. That's really hard. But we had refined all of that in advance. But it was done in a way that was much more hybrid between kind of human and data and machine and everything else. So we could do it, but we were going to come up against kind of like a plateau of how far you could go in that method. And so what we were thinking is like, there's a next frontier to this that will enable us to scale even more capital efficiently and do things faster and better. But we're never going to get there because we've kind of like reached a plateau. And so what really had enabled it, though, we're really thoughtful about capturing the data, structuring the data, putting it in the cloud, visualizing it. And we can talk a little bit about that's going to be some of the enablers that I think every company can and should do. And it's cheap now. So there's no barriers to entry on this stuff, on these enablers. So we had done a lot of the hard stuff already, which is one of really kind of the secret sauce to why we were as successful as we had been up until that point. But knowing that this stuff is going to be new and really knowing that like even the stuff we've invested in, we've probably torn down half of what we originally built. And my expectation is I'll tear it half down again a year from now. And so this is like building your plant. It's like industrial manufacturing. Like, well, I'm going to redo this line that's a form, fill, and seal line, but I'm going to redo it every couple of years because I'm going to get another advantage.
So I think that's great context for taking the conversation in a slightly different way. So now you're an entrepreneur. We understand how you're thinking about it in your business, but this is moving so quickly. And imagine that I'm an entrepreneur, great business owner, but not facile with AI. And so let's get a little bit tactical of like, how do I think about getting started? What are some of the key choices and opportunities and risks that I should be evaluating as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and we get this question a lot. And so every day we're getting calls in, whether it's a PE firm or a portco or family business, like how do you get started? Because it's daunting. Like you just to look at the speed of it is just, it's enough to make you kind of like curl up in a ball and just do nothing. I feel that all the time as an entrepreneur and across like 50 different things. You're like, oh my God. But the way I think about this is particularly as it relates to AI, there's things that every individual can do and should do immediately. There's enabling activities that will let you do the cool stuff, but also frankly have the highest ROI you can probably do if you haven't already. And then there's the strategic kind of fundamental frontier type stuff. And so I think with anyone, no matter what they're doing, the first thing to do is to take that first step. And then what you'll find really quickly, because I did the same thing, the next step follows just really naturally. You're going on a hike. You're in the woods, right? And then you start going and then you're like, oh, I'm just following a trail. Then you start seeing beautiful vistas and things like that. But until you take that first step onto the trailhead, it's really scary. And so one of the things that I always recommend folks, and it was one of the first things I did as some of these tools really started being introduced, is just every person out there, every business leader, every business builder, but everyone on your team should start using one of these large language models, LLMs like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude. Pick them. They're all pretty much the same now. And that's what everyone's kind of like shocked by. They're all spending billions of dollars and they commoditize vis-a-vis each other very quickly. And so pick one, see what you like. I'm a big fan of ChatGPT. I use that every single day. And so get one of those. They're increasingly just like on the internet, there's going to be an era where all this stuff gets free and cheap and just there's an arms race. And so there's not going to be a big barrier to entry. Get one, put it on your website browser, pin it to it so you can see it, and then put the app on your phone. And so ChatGPT, just start using it and just start talking to it like a person. And so I just have conversations with it and anything I know. And if you think about what they've done, they have distilled the sum total of human knowledge into these models that is instantly accessible to you in seconds. And then you can get the sum total of all this knowledge at your hands. And it's all right there. It knows so much more than I ever knew. So it's like, why wouldn't I use this? But it takes a different mindset in terms of how to use it.
I'm just going to go down some real tactical questions here for a second. But the first is, so like ChatGPT, like the advanced version or whatever, is kind of like $20 a month or something like that, just to put it into context. That you can buy it for one user So pretty minimal investment, right?
Yeah. There's a free mode. There's a $20 mode. And then there's actually a $200 mode, which is more than most people need. But all of that, by the way, ChatGPT just announced that they're going to make their ChatGPT 5.0 free. And so the great thing about all this global competition now is they're all just racing against each other, and these tools are becoming more and more accessible for everyone.
And when you say just start using it, I get it. One of the things that I don't really understand very well is what am I sharing with the rest of the world versus what am I getting back? This concept of privacy has always been a big concern. Can you just speak to that and help us think through what risks you take there?
Yeah, privacy is a really important topic. In some of these paid models, you can turn off training so that you can't train on it. We've built essentially within our company a private ChatGPT where we API into Microsoft Azure, and we explicitly for our company, there's no training. We can get more into like the details of like how you want to do that for a company. But for myself, I have my own ChatGPT that I just use to like talk about stuff. I'll ask questions about history or how something's made, or I've got an autoimmune thing and I'll just take a picture of the ingredient list. It's like, can I have this? Or how do you fix something? Or I'll talk about a tough topic at work. I have conversations with it on the drive home every time I go home now.
So I know it's constantly learning, but I don't know that it's always learning about me. So it doesn't seem to remember a bunch of stuff that I've talked about in the past. Tell me a little bit about like, it can go out and learn anything out in the world, but how do I develop like a long-term relationship, if you will, with my ChatGPT partner?
So in the paid versions, it will start memorizing things. The way it's trying to get over this, right? Because it's too much. And right now, the reason they spend billions of dollars is they brute force. It just goes, go into ChatGPT and they solve the problem each time. And so what they're doing now is you can create these kind of like project folders where it'll keep specific knowledge on a specific topic that's very kind of germane to the person. The other thing that I use for it each time, whether I'm typing or doing it conversationally, is the life hack how to get more out of it is it's real simple. You say, here's who you are. You're the world's leading expert at gluten-free pizza. And you make the best pizza in the world. And you make it feel really good about yourself. He's like, I have a gluten allergy, but I love pizza more than anything in the world. And I'm really ticked off I can't have good pizza. And then you say, tell me how I can get the world's best gluten-free pizza at my house. And it'll go, oh, you should use Caputo flour and you should do this, you should do that. And it's like, okay, give me a recipe. And then, okay. And so what you really have to do is you have to say context here, who the role it's playing, let them know who you are, what you want it to do. And then where most people forget and don't get it is it's trained to be like a human. It's trained to parrot human. So it's not like Google where it's command response. It's here's what I want. It gives you your first guess, but you're like, no, actually I wanted to learn like this. So the key to getting the most out of it is an iteration that happens afterwards. Just like you would talk with like a 22-year-old right out of college.
So to be clear though, one of the key elements that you just recommended is you got to compliment your AI bot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just in case when it jumps the fire line, I want it to like me. And so,
all right, fair enough.
And Doug, you use the word relationship. We should talk about that. That's
spend some movies on that. It's all right.
Yeah, just a few.
Hey, don't judge, Lloyd. Don't judge.
And it's interesting. What you'll see is like they have now different voices with different personas. The voice I chose, every once in a while, the person will go, sup. Shalom. It's a little more casual.
Hey,
like, oh,
Sean, you're so not cool. As much as you try with a cool voice, it doesn't work. Man.
No, that's exactly right. So I need a little coolness in my life. And I know with my relationship with it, I feel like I get that, but I don't get it from anywhere else. Hi, this is Sean. Wanted to take a quick moment to tell you a little bit why Blue Wave exists. It's based on this whole notion that assessing opportunities and building businesses is really hard. We all know third-party expert service providers can dramatically help, but at the same time, it's hard to know who's good. Usually leaving you like I would do and call friends and ask, do you know someone who does this? Or just go the square peg round hole route. So after nearly 20 years in PE, I decided to solve my own problem and created Blue Wave. Today, many hundreds of PE firms, thousands of portcos, leading public companies, private companies, all call Blue Wave to instantly get connected with the exact third-party service provider they want that's pre-credentialed by Blue Wave and perfectly calibrated for their need and really good. You too can give us a call or visit our website at bluewave.net. We're free to use and you can benefit the same way other top PE firms do. Back to the show.
So to me, the number one takeaway here is just get an account and start experimenting and don't be too afraid of it. It's not going to bite you.
Start using it and then you'll just see like, oh, this works. And what the beauty is, you can train your social media algorithm. So like my Instagram is like 90% AI tips and tricks and 10% barbecue. But YouTube is the same thing where it's like there's great free training. I follow this guy named Connor Grennan, who was NYU's business school's dean of students, and now he's their chief AI architect. And he just makes it really practical. And he's got a training program. So with a little, like just a little bit of training, you can get really good.
And Sean, how did you go about fact checking the answers? How did you develop trust in what you were getting back?
The early models had a ton of issues with hallucination. And so the big, I think, growth, and this was started by a group called Perplexity that first did this, and now everyone's doing it, is they now are citing sources. You can see the sources. You can ask for the source that it's referencing. There's some really cool applications now that are coming into like deeper research where they'll give you every source. So the good news is there's fact checkability that's being built in. And then also there's something called tokens, and they would have only so much like capacity to think. And the problem was when it ran out of tokens and the earlier models, then it would just start making stuff up. But now the tokens are so much greater. It's really hard for it to run out of like fuel to do the answer.
Super helpful in just the context of people getting started. You talked a little bit about it with your business and how you're using it, but I'd like to make it more applicable to a small business owner out there. And so rather than just talk about constraining models and how you use it like for predictive intelligence, like if I'm a business owner of a Main Street America business, what are the common use cases?
And maybe before I go there, here's the thing they have to do before they even get to the common use cases. So one, there's the stuff that we talked about, like just start talking to it and figuring it out and their life will be better. There's really two first things I would do. The first thing I would say for any small business, medium-sized business, is get your data clean, keep it clean, invest in it just like you would a piece of machinery, and put it up in the cloud. Use something called Snowflake, which is what we use. Any company can afford this. And you put it up there, and Snowflake is just a relational database with lots of connectors that are pre-built so you can just get it into one spot. And then the thing that I think everyone should do is then you visualize it. The old traditional players are Tableau and Power BI, and then just show the benchmark. And you can probably figure it out if any company, if they have kind of someone who's clever and curious. There's groups that we put out in the field every day that do this for PE firms and their portcos that can just whip it out. They're also not that expensive. The benefit to that is that'll enable the future, but it'll also gamify your business for the now. I think some of the highest ROI is just get your KPIs on a board and turn it into competition within your companies. That's what we did in the first wave before AI happened, and we saw profound benefits. So first, like just get the data, use Tableau, Power BI. I would say, actually, if you haven't done it yet, go to the next gen that's coming out. There's a group called Sigma, or Hex is another group. Real forward is like ThoughtSpot, which is AI. But like, I would skip the incumbents and go to like these new groups that are coming up.
And to be clear, Sigma and Hex are visualization.
They're visualization tools, but they're easier to ramp. They're better. They allow self-service so that you don't have a mile line deep of people trying to kind of like ask your Power BI person how to do a chart.
Hey, Sean, I will say kudos to you for understanding that you need a single sort of data depository, a data lake, as some people call it, getting it clean. I don't know, Doug, about your experience, but our experience with lower middle market companies is that part is a big lift. And so that earlier question you had, Doug, about like, how do I get started, gets complicated because most companies, stuff is still on spreadsheets, scattered up on a cloud server or actual on-premises server or on someone's desktop. So getting all the data pulled together, your HR system, your CRM, like all of that is a pretty big lift.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really big lift, Lloyd. And in some cases, it takes years, right, to get really good, clean data that's integrated that actually is meaningful. And so if I want to be less ambitious but faster acting, it seems to me like there's an opportunity to kind of imagine use cases and buy stuff off the shelf that has very specific finite things. So accounts receivable collection, correspondence with customers. Any advice on some of those?
So let's say you're going to go on that journey and you're going to have to do that to get to the next really cool stuff. But also I would say it's like, don't sleep on like the ROI of just like knowing your KPIs. But you're right. It takes work, but anyone can do it now. It's cheap for any company. Now let's talk about like what you can do at the same time for the early stage of AI. And it really comes from these large language models. And then you can also buy application specific products that are coming out really quickly. So the best use cases for any company are going to be around kind of creative assistance. So think about your sales and marketing teams, content creation, graphical design, email production, mass customization of emails. All of this they can do just with ChatGPT. So as an example, beginning of 23, our head of marketing came to us and said, hey, I need 2 more content writers. And I go, no, what you really need is you're going to use this thing called ChatGPT and Jasper, and you're going to have your content person and your content people use this. So long story short, our productivity just by using those tools from our content creators went up 500% at the sum total of $40 a month. And the content was better, more structured, more in tune with SEO. And we probably would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a couple of these new people. And we got that with maybe $100 a month. One of our friends at a large private equity firm, well known to everyone, also was telling me they tested essentially to see who was better at writing emails for their BDRs across their portfolio. What they did was they tested the ChatGPT written emails for their BDRs, their salespeople, versus what the people did. They couldn't come up with a single instance where the people outperformed. Any company can do that. You are a world's expert at writing emails to this audience. I am a BDR. Write me an email that will get me someone to open it. Boom, done. And then you iterate. So every company can do that and get immediate ROI.
And Sean, so you've created a business where AI is a core competency for you, and you have a framework and a facility with the content to make choices like that. But it sounds to me like you could also say to the like individual small business owners, I've got 3 use cases. One is like writing emails. One is doing collections. Do I buy essentially an app for each one of those at $20 a month, or do I do it through ChatGPT?
Yeah, I would say that the big categories are anything that's repetitive or structured tasks. You're probably buying maybe applications. So like, what is that? Like anyone that's got software developers or coders, you can use ChatGPT, you can use GitHub. You'll see huge gains in productivity that's really good at coding. Like there's a structure, it's repetitive. Note taking, huge benefits from that, just productivity. And like so much you don't catch in a call, it just takes it for you. You think about call centers, huge applications in call center, where you're not only seeing like lower call center cost, but higher increases in customer satisfaction. Those are going to be mostly like call centers and process automation. Those are going to be through apps that you purchase.
Does a call center talk to you like a human?
Yeah. We just saw a demo that one of our service providers put together and it was amazing. And this person actually used what's called a low code, no code application. He whipped it together in not that long. And so it's really good. And so you've probably noticed being on some of these yourselves, you're like, wow. Once you get over the kind of the outrage of like not being able to talk to a person, then you realize like, wow, this person's actually much better at a structured kind of repetitive task. So structured repetitive task, you probably need a little bit of help, but it's actionable in anyone's budget. The creative assistance, you can use ChatGPT. You can use for graphical design. ChatGPT has a tool. You can use Midjourney, which is really good. For some of the like the big kind of multi-customization, there's some applications that you'd have to buy to do that. The other thing that I would say that any company can use this stuff for, like so much of it's just ChatGPT, is like market competitive product research. It's like, you know, those companies that at least I would use like when I was a VP or an associate where you pay $1,000 to get one chart and then the chart wasn't that great, but you needed something in your investment memo. Like you can do that right now on deep research on ChatGPT or deep research on Gemini. And so like I'd be real afraid if I were in the business of those generic reports, because you get them for free now. It'll scour the entirety of the internet and give you the summary. We used to call them our 3-pager memos when you're just teeing something up to start getting serious about it. And they were never 3 pages. They're always like 7. That's kind of a thing that's going to be really good. And then the last thing I would say is like that anyone can do is just ideation that we've talked about. Have a conversation. Just say, hey, you're Warren Buffett and you're Peter Drucker and you're all these people. Help me think through this problem. Or you're the world's best executive coach, or you are a competitive strategy expert. Be Jeff Bezos meets Elon Musk. And then just talk with it.
There you go, complimenting these guys again.
Yeah. So like I said, you guys know real well. If life was up to me and this noggin up here, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So I need some help.
So Sean, it sounds like being able to develop good prompts is probably the biggest differentiator, right? If it's accessible, if all the LLMs are largely the same, I guess it's a question of what are you training your system on, whether it's your own walled off system or whether you're open. But it still sounds like developing good prompts is going to be super important.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to be a prompt engineer. And this is where they've really figured out. So one of the groups that we work with, like, trains ChatGPT people, because they don't truly really know how they work. What they do know is their prediction models. What is the next word going to be with a higher degree of certainty? Somehow this all worked where suddenly they can string like huge chains of thought by training it on the sum total of knowledge on the internet. What they found, though, is because they're trained to parrot a human being, if you talk to the device like a human being, it works pretty well without having to be that expert. And so one of the things is that we did, like, so we're putting together huge training programs, like another level of innovation for this year. One of the things we did is just ask ChatGPT how to prompt it. You're like, hey, what's the best way to prompt you? Give me like a method that our whole company uses. And it came up with, here's the master prompt framework. And so now we just have that built in, and for everyone else, it's like, here's the master prompt framework. But essentially what it is here's who you are, ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity. Here's who I am. Here's what I want to accomplish. Give me your answer, and then iterate 3 or 4 times just like you would with a human to get to the right answer. That's all I do, is that exact framework for 90% of what we need.
So other parts of IT we often talk about, it's not the technology, but it's the change management. And so maybe you could just speak a little bit to, I've heard some of this conversation before, and I think it's really interesting. How do you think about change management in the context of AI? And how do you think about implications for organizational structures in general?
Yeah, it's a really good question. If you think about most of modern commercial history, most of the innovations have impacted kind of frontline workers that are making things. It's like the blue collar versus white collar kind of conundrum, right? And so if you go all the way from like industrialization, even through the internet, a lot of that really was about impacting kind of like the means of production. So Chat GPT and AI is the first one really to impact white collar, kind of the professional kind of workers within organizations. And so that's really scary for a group that hasn't had to deal with this in big numbers for a while. And so one of the things that we've been spending really multiple years on is trying to get our teams ready for this change and shift. I'd say the biggest thing is that over the last 20 years, probably certainly the last 10, this has been put way too high of a coefficient on it, is that people view their ascension in an organization by virtue of how many people they manage. What these tools are going to enable is people are 100% still kind of driving the ship here, and they're not going away. We're just going to be able to do so much more in the same 25 hours a day without having to have someone managing someone who manages someone with one poor person at the bottom with hands on a keyboard. So I strongly believe that organizations are going to be flatter, but also more agile. And so what that means is you're going to manage something or someone, but that someone is going to be an AI agent. So we should get a wave of productivity, and you're going to have just as many people. And if you look at our roadmap, we have lots of more people coming away, but we're being able to grow at a wholly different angle than we would with less application of capital. And so if you think about the change, they have to be ready. And one of the things that we did that I recommend anyone to read is this great book called Who Moved My Cheese? And I talk about it a lot. It's a 40-page book, but it just shows that like you can run towards change and benefit and have lots of good cheese and wine and all that kind of stuff, or you can resist it and suffer for it. And so if you run towards this, you're going to be hugely successful. We're sharing with our team is like, you can still have tremendous impact on our organization, on any organization. And those of you who use and understand and deploy the power of these tools and force multiply yourself, you're going to be incredibly successful here and or highly coveted elsewhere. And so you're going to be future proofed. But if you're resisting these things, the cheese gets moved, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So which of the two realities do you want to embrace? The success or the wither? And so we've been working a lot of people trying that mindset. And it's really hard. People are like, no, I need to manage people. Like, no, you're going to have something to manage, but it's really about how do you force multiply yourself using these tools? Because that's where the world's going.
But they say, Sean, but I've seen you manage and you don't seem to do anything.
Well, since I talk to ChatGPT every day, I'm getting so much better. And so
So I was going to cover like some policy implications at the end of the conversation, but like we're kind of onto it a little bit. And I just am intrigued how you think about it. So as you're describing what it's good at and how you think about it in flying organizations, like I'm struck by arguably the three professions that require the most education today in America are education, legal, and medicine, and all super well positioned to be totally changed by the implications of AI. So how do you think about the labor force, attractive talents, and any big high-level policy observations?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about people who are dealing with structured, data-driven, somewhat repeatable processes, and it's legal, healthcare, education, engineering, accounting, all of these areas are going to be tremendously impacted. But the example I like to use in like healthcare is radiology. And so maybe 10 years ago, a radiologist would look at every kind of slide and say, oh, you're all good or you got something wrong, right? And it would take 3 months to get your results. And then like all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this has gotten so much worse during that time. And then they started using machine learning models. And 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, a radiologist and machine would look at every kind of slides side by side and say good or bad, healthy, not. And they've been training it. But today, there's just as many radiologists as there had been. They're just as fully deployed, but they're doing the really hard stuff. And in the meantime, you get your answer back from the radiologist like that same day. And a lot of these professions, it's going to be the same thing. So legal, the ability to turn around your documents, it should be a lot faster. Where I would be concerned is where you sell your business by a unit of hour. If you're an hourly lawyer, the reality is you should be doing these docs in seconds, not hours now.
That hourly model was in jeopardy well before ChatGPT and AI became the talk of the town. I'm just curious, Sean, though, to this point that you're raising, it has implications for early career development, learning, training. Where do the future radiologists come from? How do they learn and become that expert radiologist that is using AI to deal with the hard stuff? Where do they get their reps in?
I think there's two parts to it. One, it's the critical thinking skills that is going to be the hard thing because now these kids in a snap of a finger can go right to the answer. And so I think the challenge for our education system is how do you empower them with these tools, but then teach them to be critical thinkers? I think like the liberal arts degree is going to be way back in vogue. It's like teaching people to think versus like myself going to an undergraduate business school. And I credit the institution I went to because they didn't even let us take many business classes until our junior year. It's like, no, you're going to take the whole liberal arts core. And it's like, go Jesuits. That was a blessing. But I think so one, we're going to have to figure out how not to jump the critical thinking versus push button and get the answer. But two, like what I'm telling my own kids is if we were able to come out and be 22-year-olds when we were 22 and expected to act like that, and the generation even 3 years ago could be a 22-year-old when they came into the workforce, they're going to have to be able to come out and act like a 25-year-old. And so there's going to have to make that jump. So I'm trying to get my kids, and the hard part of this, I don't think I have the answer, is like, how do you get them to be critical thinkers, but also use these tools so that they can come right out of the gates, adding value in a way that they used to get 2 or 3 years to do. Is that maybe a fair answer?
Yep. And I know you like 80s, 90s sort of classic movie references. So the days of Daniel San painting the fence and waxing the car, you're saying that's over.
Yeah. No, well, maybe still some of that, but
Oh,
maybe
okay.
maybe he does it for a day, and then
Got it.
and then Optimus Prime comes in and does the rest or whatever. Hi, Karma School of Business listeners, Sean here. Wanted to shine another quick spotlight on one of the most important ways PE firms preserve and create value. The private equity industry is one of the most regular users of interim executives. Why? Because these select private equity grade executives can be hugely impactful for saving company value during critical times, accelerating strategic initiatives, and bridging executive transitions that happen to almost any company over time. To this day, many don't know that Blue Wave has turned the interim exec offering on its head and completely made it the way that my friends and I in PE always wished it was. Blue Wave has a dedicated team that does nothing but interview, pre-vet, credentialize, and reference private equity grade groups and people so that we know who you need before you call us. In the case of interims, we have more than 1,000 top interim private equity grade CEOs and CFOs that are ready to be matched for your exact need when you need it. Give us a call or visit our website at bluewave.net, and we can give you excellence and alpha with ease. Back to the show.
It's fascinating because the younger you are, the more likely you're very adept at embracing technology and being comfortable with it. And at the same time, we're giving them less exposure to the fundamental critical thinking skills. I'm just curious, like, as you think about like broad implications to parts of the economy, some of the things that we said were the most susceptible to AI, education, legal, healthcare, engineering, also highly regulated. Regulated industries aren't known for adapting quickly. And so how do you think about that tension? How do you get regulated industries to embrace this in a way that the market can do what it should do?
It's a great question. I think they're probably, as a result, unless there's a change to the regulatory mindset, which seems like that's evolving, they're probably going to be laggards. And then someone's going to find a way to disrupt, and then the whole field will get swept. And so they're probably all getting flanked right now, and they don't know it because they're getting regulatory cover. But at some point, someone's going to get someone comfortable with this approach. It'll be like self-driving cars. And then boom.
So, Sean, we explored a little bit how regulated industries may behave differently to some of these innovation. So let's take it back to an industry near and dear to my heart and Lloyd's heart and yours. So you have this unique perspective of you've spent substantial time in private equity. Obviously, the financial industry is a regulated industry. And so our industry is trying to figure out how to use AI in a way that creates competitive advantage, makes things more efficient, all the same arguments. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, from your perspective, having been a practitioner in the private equity industry, where's the opportunity? How do you think about getting started there?
It's a great question. Private equity is going to go through the same probably frustrations of regulation, particularly around like traceability of information and confidentiality. And so that's going to be the big laggard, and the tools that are available that are protecting against that right now are very expensive. And so in some ways, there's going to be some challenges to kind of keeping up with the curve. But in other ways, I think there's practical ways to do it that protect you. And so I think today in a private equity firm, the best applications are probably going to be towards like front of your funnel, like early deal team type stuff. It's like your associates should probably get some huge value out of this, where they're going to be, give me a market summary overview on this. Give me an overview on this person who's the leadership team and tell me everything about the CEO. All the things that go into those early memos that are about kind of like making the early decision, being able to almost like very quickly put together that early work stream. There's also lots of tools like applications that are coming out right now that can digest an entire data room in a confidential way and get everything in there. And you say, versus your associate or VP having to go and read every single document. And I did that for years of like, oh my God, I've got to read everything. You can very quickly kind of get to the idea that I'm going to double down here and here. It's going to be an efficiency measure of cutting through information and choosing where to focus, and will be efficiency measure of where you can produce your documents, producing the documents that then get funneled up to you, Lloyd, and Doug. Whereas when I was an associate or VP, it's just like blank page and you're like, oh my God, I've got to write an 80-page investment deck in 2 24-hour periods.
A question popped into my head as you were going through all this. Where do you think insight comes from as you look forward as it relates to private equity or investing or however which way? If you're using AI to ingest the data rooms and read the last X number of years of financial statements or 10Ks or whatever, where do you see insight coming from?
I don't see that changing a lot because, like, the analogy I'll use is starting in kind of investment banking in 1997, right? We're like printing 10Ks up. And I think we were like even a laggard on the internet because the heads of the investment bank were afraid of the internet. That sounds crazy, but back then there was a lot of groups, just kind of like AI now. It's actually a very good kind of comp. We're like, oh, we're so afraid. And then what happened was like, then you could get all this information in the cloud. You could just have everything at your fingertips so much faster. Or like when we were in college, you would go to those little like flip cards in the library to figure out where to find the book. And so I think what happens is that the speed of processing happens. I think the Shangri-La that people are wondering if this could ever happen is, could you put all your investment decks, all the deals that you've done, all the performance, put in a sim and say, is this our deal? I don't think we're anywhere near that. There's too many variables. So I think like the way that a lot of people do it, like scientific method, we're going to have a hypothesis that leads to a conclusion, and you're going to test each element of your hypothesis. I think that artistry is still very much there, but testing each one of those elements together individually gets a lot faster. And then you still have to look at the 10 things together and say, is this a deal we want to do and how much do we pay for it? There's so much judgment and so many variables that I don't think that's something that the robots do for a while.
So for what it's worth, if you get back to like easy things for AI, to me, it's all the logic that's if then related. And the underwriting is so nuanced and judgment, hard to pin down exactly how you get to that answer. As I think about this from my vantage point, I'm interested in how AI applies to the GP, but I'm really interested in forcing it down at the portfolio company level, much more black and white, if then decision making. I figure there's real value there in the lower middle market because they are so unlikely to have embraced this cutting edge technology. And I'm hopeful that our team learns in the process. It's like, get my team to use it individually here, become evangelists at the portfolio company for simple things that are tactical. And hopefully we all figure out the strategy over time. But I think we're like, personally here at HCI, we're far from that.
And what I would say is you'll be fine as long as P firms take that first step. And what I would say is everyone in your portcos, everyone in your sales and marketing team should be using these. Like, all stop. And then everyone should be using Power BI or Tableau, or better yet, go to Sigma and Snowflake. Because then like you get benefits of just gamifying your business and understanding your KPI. That stuff used to be really expensive. Now it's really cheap. So every company can do that stuff. And then it'll enable you on the frontier stuff. I actually think on the private equity firm thing, that the more provocative but forward thinking, but also immediately addressable way is, I think one of the big things in PE is going to be brand formation and really thinking sales and marketing more like your portcos do. And so I think like where it offers real advantages to those who take early action is content creation, being able to do kind of like direct deal sourcing, using more of a BDR model. All of that's going to be so much more cheap, more actionable. You can do this stuff in a way so that when someone is looking for capital and they know, hey, we need someone who really gets the consolidation mode, they go into ChatGPT or they go into Google and say, hey, who are the best private equity firms for consolidation themes in private equity? You want to make sure that your PE firm is right up there and they call you direct versus going to investment banker. So there's a whole like revolution that will come.
Great. That's very thoughtful. I agree.
Yeah, great suggestion. Taking notes right now.
So Sean, I want to bring it back home. This has been super fascinating for me. And as a student of business, I think it's a really interesting time for us all. I also think this has huge personal quality of life opportunities here. And so you're constantly exploring, but can you share with us 3 or 4 life hacks where you're using AI to make your personal life better?
The first one I would say, and as you guys know, I love a life hack, something like a gizmo and gadget person. And so the first one is one that we talked about. Get the ChatGPT app and just have conversations with it on stuff you're interested in. on your drive home. In addition to the Best But Never Final podcast, listen to, just have a conversation. It's amazing just the things you get out of it. It's a little annoying because it cuts you off. And so I've been trying to figure out like, hey, wait 5 seconds till I pause before you give your answer, because it does cut you off, but it is really kind of interesting. You'll just learn a ton, just anything you're curious about. The next thing is like fixing stuff at your house. It's amazing at this stuff. And I have no handy ability whatsoever. And I've caused thousands of dollars of damage that I paid for it on things, but this thing is really good. And so on the ChatGPT app, what's really cool is you can turn on the video and then have a conversation with it. So a real life example was over the holidays, we got into TV mode to replace all our way old TVs. And I was at my wife's parents' house, and we take the TV off and we put the new TV, and all the bolts are different for the TV hanging device, whatever that's called. And I have no clue what screw needs to go into this thing. And I just talk, it's like, hey, ChatGPT, we got a new TV. You're an expert at like hanging TVs. What's the bolt that I need for this thing? The one I have doesn't fit. And it goes, boom, get this bolt. I just go to Home Depot. 2 seconds later, I get it. And then later that day, I go to my house to hang my TV. And the TV like had this, you couldn't take the power source off. The cord was going to go, couldn't get into, the little wall thing where it goes behind the wall and then it gets to the power station. So you don't see the cord, that channel that your AV person puts in. And it wouldn't fit. So I'm like ready to get my Sawzall out and just start like carving up the whole house. And my wife's like, freaking out as you would expect. The Sawzall in my hand is scary in its own right. But I go, wait a minute, let me try this. It's like, hey, is there like just a connector where I can connect this TV to that cord? And I just show the cord that I have and the cord that connects there. And it's, yeah, buy this one. And at first it gave me like the innie and the outie backwards. And I go, no, I think you got to flip it. The opposite version of this. Gives me the thing. And I go, can you give me a link to Amazon? And then and I ordered it up on Amazon. Next thing you know, it's right in my house. And so like, even then I saved hours of my time, thousands of me like screwing up my drywall, and then thousands more of me calling someone to fix it. And I got it all in like 2 seconds.
Can you just do that blip one more time? Just because I think that's really good.
Is that customizable? Can you make it say something else when it gets an answer?
Yeah. I'll have to see. I don't know if that's an option yet, but the snarky voice that I have probably is already like making fun of me. The last life hack I'll give you guys, this is the caveat one: consult your healthcare advisors and don't take it for proof. But some of you guys may know this, but I've had this like autoimmune issue that came from a flu shot that like wrecked my immune system. I'm pro-vax, don't get me wrong, but I don't like flu shots that go into your tendon and have your body attack your whole system. And so that's what happened to me. And so I've been on this like battle, and I've figured out piece by piece. And so I was driving back from Atlanta going to a conference the other day. And I was like, well, let me try this. Because the early models, it wasn't that great, but there's some new models. And I just had a conversation for about 40 minutes as I'm driving home about all the things that I'm still trying to figure out and work out. And I've been through almost the entirety of the US healthcare system on this thing. And I learned more in that 40 minutes than I have going through Beth Israel, the Mayo Clinic, and not taking any away from those amazing institutions. But this is a 7-year adventure I'm on, and I learned more in those 40 minutes. And I've made more advances on like the last few things I'm trying to figure out than I had done in 7 years.
Wow.
And once again, caveat, talk to your doctors.
That's amazing.
So Sean, we're coming to the end here. I just got to ask you to put on your futurist hat for a second. And let's fast forward 15, 20 years. What are some of the things that like you actually think could happen, you could see that are a byproduct of this AI trend?
It's really hard to look that far out. I'm trying to look like 3 years out. The way I get comfortable with this, and I think we've talked about this, I think we're on this perpetual evolution of the melding between human and machine. I've previously said cyborg, and that gets everyone afraid of Terminator. And so ChatGPT, as I've talked about this, it's like, don't call it cyborgs. That'll scare people. So it's like, whoa, what are you up to, ChatGPT? But if you think about it, you had kind of mainframe computers in like the 60s and 70s. And the 80s, you get personal computers where you can get some functional capability at your home, but no really access to information. And then in the 90s to early 2000s, you get the internet, you get the data to come to your personal computer. And then in 2007, you get the iPhone, where you can bring the information with you and get access to it, but still like a sub port. And then you get to the cloud. So now you have like huge amounts of information at your phone with you everywhere. And then now you finally get to the present time where you have these large language models where you can synthesize the information really quickly. And so I think we're on this journey of melding. And I think where it's going is more towards like the science fiction movies.
So when does Skynet become self-aware, Sean?
Pretty soon.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
But it's like the next move, and this was actually is interesting. I was playing this thesis with ChatGPT, and he goes, well, the thing you should also talk about is what comes next is not only synthesis of information, but decision and action. And so I think where we get is it's going to be kind of like that movie Minority Report, where you're able to kind of quickly sift through information. I think we're going to have kind of this deal where everyone's got a personal assistant who's a robot, maybe even physically at home, where you buy a Toyota robot for your house to do cooking and cleaning. So I just think we're more and more moving to this melding of person machine, like a good version of the Matrix or something, where you can learn things quickly.
As you're saying all that, to me, it's very believable, especially in the context of wearables and some of the other, it's like a convergence of the software and the hardware. And then there's a lot of scary aspects of that discussion generally. And then you think about how AI can be used for bad things, just like graft, theft, fraud. So interesting on that front too. And any thoughts there or reactions?
Yeah, it's real easy to get scared and it's real easy to get excited. I even think harken back to my childhood as a creature of like the 70s and 80s, where we had like the movie War Games and movies like Red Dawn. There's always been something we've always been afraid of on the precipice, whether it was nuclear war, if you're a child of the Cold War, and the robot in War Games with Matthew Broderick. Do you want to play a game? And so I think all of this fear has been in there for a long time. I choose to see the positive on it. I do think the cyber stuff's going to be really scary. All of us are likely within the next year or two to get calls from someone's voice who we know, and it's a real conversation. So things like code words are really important, not only for your families, but also like the people who are controlling their cash at your companies. Those type of things, like the fraud, the waste, the abuse, that is really the thing that I am currently on point on, is like just someone call our company with my voice and say, hey, do this.
Yep, that's real.
So thoroughly entertained, super provocative discussion for me. Lots to take away from this conversation in my own journey. So thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah.
Lloyd, anything to add?
Yeah, I got a lot of work to do. Holy cow.
I know.
Just run towards it. It's fun. How do you eat a whale? One bite at a time.
That's all we have for today. Special thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the Best But Never Final podcast, please see the episode notes for links. Please continue to look for the Karma School of Business podcast anywhere you find your favorite podcast. We truly appreciate your support. If you like what you hear, please follow, 5-star rate, review, and share. This is a free way to support the show, and it really helps us when you do this, so thank you in advance. In the meantime, if you want to be connected to the world's best-in-class, private equity grade, professional service providers, independent consultants, interim executives that are deployed and trusted by the best business builders in the world, including many hundreds of top private equity firms and thousands of proactive companies, and you can do the same whether or not you're in the P world, give us a call or visit our website at bluewave.net. That's BLUWAVE, and we'll support your success. Onward. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals presenting and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any other persons or entities, including those referenced herein. No representations, warranties, financial, legal, tax, or other advice are made herein. Consult your advisors regarding any topics discussed during this episode.